These are the videos you want to watch. You want to watch all of these videos, you want to like them all, you want to subscribe, you want them to share with all of your friends so that you might gain knowledge in the ways of the Force. Well, this can only be how to play in a Star Wars game. With it being the most topical movie of the year almost, Star Wars is sweeping across the world again in a wave of brand new products that we haven't seen the likes of before. And it's not going to stop. Disney said that they've got a range of movies just lined up to come out. And they've already in the process of finishing shooting a Han Solo, Lando Calrissian early Origins movie. So that will be out next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and in perpetuity or until cinemas burn to the ground. Either way, you are most likely going to come across a wave of Star Wars role-playing games, and there are many systems out there. There's a D6 method, there's a D20 method, there's Fantasy Flight's latest iteration, which is its own custom dice. There are just a vast array of systems out there. How do you, though, as a player, play in a Star Wars game and make it feel as if it's your own, and also make it feel as if you're actually doing something and not trying to follow along the plot lines of one of the original films? This can be tricky. Star Wars covers the full gambit of character types, of roles, and of characters, really. So how do you make yours stand out, and how do you adapt to the Star Wars universe if it's not something that you're particularly familiar with? If you know the difference between a Toydarian, a Trandoshan, and a Twi'lek, well, you're already in a good spot. If you don't, however, you might just find yourself up the wrong alley late at night with a very angry Wookiee. Let's start. When you're creating your character, you go through the normal processes. You go through the normal steps of creating a backstory. However, this time round, when we look at the theme of Star Wars is always about sacrifice. That's the underlying principle behind almost every motivation within the series. The sacrifice of self by the JEDI, so that the greater good may persevere. You sacrifice all emotion, well, most of your emotions, you sacrifice romance, you sacrifice entanglements, you sacrifice friends, so that you can remain pure to the essence of the Force. If you are SITH, you sacrifice yourself to your passions. You don't hold back. You don't give anything that is not 100% of self. If you're a rebel, you will sacrifice your family and friends so that you can achieve the greater good. If you are part of the Empire, you will be sacrificed for the greater good. Sacrifice is a theme that runs throughout all of the Star Wars films and is something that you should build into your character. Now, if you didn't watch the video that was released last week on Destiny, I suggest you go and have a look, because Destiny and Star Wars might as well have been the same video. Destiny is everything that Star Wars is about, and Star Wars is all about your destiny. And it should be to sacrifice yourself at some point. And if we look at the journey of, say, Luke Skywalker, what was his sacrifice? Well, his aunt and uncle were killed. They sacrificed themselves, basically, so that their not even relative could survive. You look at what he then had to do. He sacrificed himself to go into Jabba's palace to try and rescue his friend Han Solo. And of course, ultimately, he had to sacrifice his own personal desires so that he did not destroy his father and could become part of his father's world. And his father then, of course, promptly sacrificed himself to save everybody from the Emperor. So, and those, of course, are all in the films that came out in the 80s, so if that's a spoiler alert, I'm afraid you really shouldn't be playing Star Wars role-playing games at all. So sacrifice should be part of your character's plan, your destiny. You don't necessarily need to say, well, I'm planning for my character to sacrifice themselves so that their destiny is for them to die. Maybe that's something that appeals to you, but at the same time, perhaps it isn't. What you need to do, though, is you need to build in certain hooks into your character that can be sacrificed at great cost to character. So again, it's a little bit of metagaming, a little bit of planning ahead. As with Destiny, you need to work out what it is that your character can sacrifice. Is it something like their attachment to their home planet? Is it something like their beliefs? Is it friendships? Perhaps they have a romance and that they're going to have to sacrifice that romance later on. But it's not just about the sacrifice. It's about the repercussions of the sacrifice after that. Han Solo, for example, sacrifices his love for Princess Leia when he thinks that Leia is in love with Luke. In his sacrifice, he's giving up that entire world so that she can be happy. And of course, then the repercussions, once he discovers that that is not the case and that he doesn't have to give up, is absolute cinematic gold. So it's about looking at what you can sacrifice, looking at how your character is going to react once they have sacrificed it, and aiming for those goals. Now, if you want your character to die at the very end of the major story, that's fine. All of this, as with usual Destiny, sit with your GM and work out what your GM is willing to do and is willing to allow in terms of your destiny. He's trying to create this epic Star Wars adventure, and he's competing with literally decades worth of successful movies in terms of epic destiny. So working with your character and working with your concept is about trying to find that balance where you have an idea, you're not entirely sure how your destiny is going to play out, and your GM has got a story that is going to make you want to come back for more. Now, if we look at your actual character, so let's say you've worked out your backstory and you've worked out your great destiny, and now you're coming to your character. There are so many different types of characters in Star Wars. There's pilots, there's medics, there's mechanics, there's bounty hunters, there's assassins, there's droid programmers, they're droids. There are monstrous creatures like giant Wookiees that live for a long time and have superhuman strength. There are lizards, there's fish-like creatures, there's funny little half-pig type creatures. There is just a slew of options when it comes to playing in Star Wars. The critical thing to remember is you need to decide which side you're going to be on. In most games in Star Wars, they'll be set somewhere in the Star Wars universe where there's an empire and there's some kind of rebellion. Or perhaps it's in between those phases. Either way, your choice of alien species has been prescribed by all of the literature and by the movies. So be aware of those, and if you aren't aware of them, speak to your GM. Maybe it might give you some clues as to what your destiny should be. Are you the liberator of Mon Cal? And so you are a Mon Calamari engineer who ultimately will work out how to save the Mon Calamari from the oppressive Imperials that have taken over the planet. Looking at the different races, the different classes, don't be intimidated if you don't know how the hyperdrive works. This is not Star Trek. Your engineering skills are, I hit it with a spanner, it arcs some blue stuff, and it comes right. Or I plug the droid in and the droid fixes it. Star Wars is not about the nitty-gritty, it's not about the technical, it's just about, oh, you fix the hyperdrive. You stick a spanner in, you tweak the accelerator, and off you go. This is not a detailed game. If you're a medic, you don't have to know exactly how Bacta works or what even Bacta is. You simply are a medic. The point I'm making is your career choice, although that influences what skills you might have and where you fit within the party, the game shouldn't be focused around those as your primary form of narrative. They should be dismissive roles where you heal the wounded character, you fix the starship, you pilot the astrogation check, you navigate the asteroid field, you work out the odds. Star Wars has never ever been around those kind of small details. That's for Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica and those kind of settings. This setting is about telling a rollicking good story. So, what you then need to do is then you need to work out why your character is running around in the Star Wars universe and why your character is willing to go beyond what they would normally be doing. Why does the medic sign up with the rebellion? Why does the Imperial pilot, who's part of a squadron of pilots, decide to go rogue. Or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he decides to do more Imperial stuff and your campaign is centered around the Empire. But what's going to get your character to leave their safe space and effectively take on the galaxy? Now that's a question that you need to answer. And it comes back to your destiny, it comes back to your character species and your class, because it's very, very, very tied together. Star Wars is not a loose, open-ended space. Things are very pigeonholed, and they're pigeonholed for a reason. The more pigeonholed they are, the easier it is to have very specific, targeted adventures and stories around the characters. The characters, although in personality are fairly broad, in terms of goal and in terms of their parameters that they operate in, they're actually quite narrow. So you need to look at what is going to motivate your characters to take on the galaxy. Why are they going to give up? And the important thing here is that saying, well, I'm actually not. I'm creating a character who's not. He's an accountant and he's going to be on the ship and he's going to do the money, and that's his role. Star Wars is about epic scale. Why did he sign up on that ship? Well, maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he didn't plan on being involved. So then the question is, why doesn't he get off at the next planet and go back to his normal life? So keep that in the back of your mind when you're role-playing. Look for reasons to stay in the fight, if you like. And if you need the motivation of, because I believe it's the right thing, well, why do you believe it's the right thing? And what is your character going to do when other characters start doing the wrong thing? You need to think about that. Conflict is what the name of the game is in this particular case. And of course, sacrifice. Something else to keep in the back of your mind whilst you are running around in a Star Wars space is maybe you want to play a lightsaber-wielding Jedi or a Sith apprentice, apprenticed to Lord Vader himself. That's entirely up to you, but check with your game master. Some game masters don't really like the idea of Jedi running around, or they've set the game during a period when the Jedi were almost eradicated down to 2 individuals. Or maybe it's set during a time when the Sith were eradicated down to 2 individuals. Alternatively, perhaps it's set in a time where the Jedi and the Sith are running around during the Great Sith War, in which case there are thousands of Jedi and there are thousands of Sith. So check with your game master first before creating a Jedi or a Sith character, and also check with the rest of your party. If the rest of your party wants to play, let's say for example, a squadron of X-Wing fighter pilots, a Jedi is going to really suffer. A lot of the systems that are available today, you have to spend the same amount of points creating your character, whether they are a Jedi or a regular pilot. So the Jedi, in order to have some kind of mind-controlling powers, is going to have to spend points there rather than points on starship operations or flight control or all of the things that all the other regular pilots have been able to spend on. So sometimes the question should be asked way before character creation, what are we playing? Are we playing as a collective group of smugglers? Are we bounty hunters? Are we just a ragtag bunch? And that's something that you can really work with, and of course then that goes back to working out your destiny and working out your sacrifice and what you're going to try and do. Now this is one system where death is something to be almost looked forward to. One looks forward. Nonetheless, the reason being is that death in Star Wars, unless you're a stormtrooper or a rebel trooper, in which case it's meaningless, but death in Star Wars is always for the most heroic moments. If you look at the death of Obi-Wan Kenobi, or of Yoda, or of Jabba the Hutt, or Boba Fett, for example, the death of characters is particularly poignant and particularly focused around some kind of act of sacrifice. Obi-Wan Kenobi died sacrificing himself so that everyone could get hold of the Death Star. All of the great deaths in Star Wars have been that way. Yoda, of course, died of old age. That's pretty long going, in his case 900 years. So that's something to think about. Don't look away from death, but try and make your death meaningful. So if your character is in a state where they're starting to die, try and look for avenues rather of a bit of self-preservation where you're going, oh, I'm trying to crawl to the airlock. Rather, try and work out a way that your death can have some kind of meaning for your companions. That's something that will really make your death feel valuable and feel as if you contributed to the story. Well, I hope some of that has given you insight. Oh, just a final note before I leave. People often go, oh, I want to play an Ewok, or I want to play a Jawa, or I want to play a Gamorrean, or even a Wookiee, for example. All of these species, although they're interesting and they fit right in with the Star Wars setting, pose certain problems. Now, the problems that they pose, in certain cases, is height. They're too short to operate most things, or they don't speak any other language apart from their own. In the movies, this is kind of ignored, but in game terms, it might not be, and you might find yourself at a disadvantage. Another point, this is really a false ending, is if you're playing a droid, droids are very difficult to play. You can have a certain amount of emotion, but there's a certain amount of lack of self-preservation as well. Droids in Star Wars embody the sacrifice mentality. Droids will never run away. They might position themselves so that they're not involved in the battle, but the moment their master or their owner or their friends are in trouble, they will go running in, even though they have very little means of doing anything effective about the situation, other than wandering around beeping, barping, or moaning about their lot in life. Of course, playing the Jedi is very difficult. Jedi are not paladin-like. A lot of people compare Jedi to paladins. Paladins have to be lawful good. Jedi are not lawful good. Jedi follow the code, which is very, very centered around non-emotion, around controlling the space and reaching amicable decisions with everybody, and by having very little inner turmoil. That's very different from running around being lawful good and preaching the right way and the wrong way. The Jedi just have the Jedi code and the Jedi way. If you're going to play a droid or you're going to play a Jedi, make sure that you brush up on all of the things that are relevant to those two very interesting and almost unique types of character in the Star Wars universe. It will make your experience better, and it will make your fellow players' experience better if you can truly encapsulate how to be a complete paranoid droid, or how to be the ever-present, ever-stable Jedi who lacks most emotional content in their being because they have managed to purge it and suppress it. I will not be here next week. I am off on holiday into deepest, darkest Africa, where I shall not be wearing any Jedi robes, for it is 35 degrees in the shade. I will see you all in 2017, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all for being part of this remarkable journey with me and the rest of the team here, and for sharing your comments, for suggestions, for criticizing when necessary, for supporting when necessary, and as always, for simply watching and letting us know that you are doing so. So to everybody, I wish you a fantastic festive season. I hope that 2017 brings you games aplenty and adventures and romances and tragedies and horrors and action and drama and suspense and all of those other wonderful things that we happen to be able to tap into on our weekly sessions when we play. So until the very next year, until next time, I wish you and your GMs happy playing.